London, England, one of the world's great cities. Modern, yet traditional, and the place we've come for the first ever Canadian TV interview with His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales.
Thank you for joining us today. Real pleasure to see you.
I'm delighted.
We've agreed to speak with the Prince about his charities and public service, and to show the surprising side of the man behind the title.
I'm the bane of my office and everybody who works.
You are?
Well, I always come up with another idea.
Some of those ideas have been risky and controversial. And of course, we want to talk about the idea of service and his family.
I was always brought up, to worry about everybody else.
And what he hopes to instill in his two sons. This is the Prince of Wales.
So, we're in London, England, and behind me is Clarence House. Clarence House is the official London residence of the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. And why are we here? Well, we're here for a conversation. And here's the thing. The Prince of Wales doesn't do a lot of television interviews, and no one can remember him ever doing one for Canadian television. This is definitely a Canadian exclusive. He's feeling under the weather. He found 15 minutes in his schedule to fit us in, and we're very grateful for it. So we're going to pop in and have a conversation with the Prince of Wales. But first, take a look at his story.
A child is born who will one day be the 41st monarch of his country since the Norman conquest. The new prince will be trained right from infancy for his high role on a future stage.
The future king. That's the way it's been for him since the day he was born in Buckingham Palace 65 years ago.
What kind of community will it be that this prince will reign over someday?
Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales.
Growing up amid the adulation that royalty has always known, but also to unprecedented exposure to the public through the eye of newspaper and television cameras.
Heir to the throne of 16 realms, including Canada. He's one of the most high-profile members of one of the world's oldest monarchies. If you were around for it, you remember the moment when the Prince and Lady Diana Spencer married in 1981. A staggering 750 million watched it on television.
Aside from the actual service, this was the highlight of the day. The royal family obviously enjoying itself on the balcony, likely as large a good-natured gathering as there's ever been, confirming that the monarchy in Britain is a good deal more than a constitutional convenience.
But outside all of that royal pomp and pageantry, he's forged a new role for himself, and it traces back to 1976. That's the year the prince completed his service in the Royal Navy. Britain was in a state of social upheaval, high unemployment, and in response, he launched an organization to support young people. It's called the Prince's Trust.
Prince Charles' genuine concern for the future quality of life in Britain is now beyond dispute. While his critics say he has no job to do and shows it, he devotes much of his energy to a campaign to make the inner cities more attractive places.
Over the last 4 decades, the trust has grown to a point where the Prince's charities, which include a branch in Canada, represent the largest multi-cause charitable enterprise in Britain. He was an early advocate of organic farming, he's an outspoken critic of some modern architecture, and not surprising, he's had to deal with the criticism aimed at him. And now, as he and the Duchess of Cornwall were set to tour Canada,
Prince Charles and Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, emerging from the plane in Halifax.
And also for the Duchess of Cornwall, it is her first visit to this part of Canada.
Great pleasure to welcome you to the province of Nova Scotia and to Canada.
the Prince's 17th Canadian visit, I spoke with the Prince of Wales about duty and, of course, about Canada.
Thank you for joining us today. A real pleasure to see you.
I'm delighted.
Thank you. Tell me about the guiding principles of the charities. When you first decided to do this, what was it you were trying to achieve?
In Canada?
Yeah.
Well, really, because I mean, having been coming to to Canada for the last 40 years or something, I just felt that after all the things I've been doing in this country, with setting up organizations and charities to try and deal with issues that I felt needed dealing with or weren't being dealt with, that perhaps now is the time to try and do similar things in Canada. Mm-hmm. And like all these things, it takes years before you've built up either the experience or the capacity to do something like that. And if you're going to do something, you have to find kind supporters and generous people and others who may be interested in what I'm trying to do. So that was really the main reason, and I thought I might be able to contribute a little bit here and there to Canadian life.
Did you have a principle that you wanted to build everything on?
Well, I suppose based on some of the things I say I've been doing here, whether it's in the built environment or community planning, or with youth business enterprise, and building young people's self-confidence and self-esteem, and giving them opportunities and helping to develop their potential, or in a whole variety of areas, and sustainability issues and generally. So I just felt that there might be some relevance in Canada to some of these issues. So obviously they're around certain principles, yeah.
You could have, as you know, you could have kind of done what you wanted in your life. Was there a pivotal moment where you thought that this kind of service was the one you wanted to do?
I couldn't have done anything else in life.
Well, you could have figured something out, I'm sure. You know some people.
Well, but I think, but I was always brought up, to worry about everybody else. And as you can imagine, the Commonwealth and in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, there's a lot of people, and I take all these things seriously.
Mm-hmm. The things that you do, it's interesting. Architecture, who would have thought it could be controversial, but it was. When you talk about built cities, organic food, people used to make jokes at the conversation about it, but all this, like, what were you feeling at the time when you were trying to affect change and were feeling that kind of attack?
Well, I mean, you could imagine it's slightly alarming and bewildering, because I thought that I was just trying to point out that there were problems that were likely to arise if we went on that way, and but I think what happens is frequently you challenge conventional wisdom and the conventional approach, and so people don't like that very much. And all I wanted to show was that I felt we had to look at these issues in order to prevent being overwhelmed by them at some stage. And I just felt also we were getting a bit out of balance in some of these things, so the baby was being thrown out with the bathwater. And I just felt it needed some things being brought back because of the way in which our existence on this earth is I don't know, so often dependent on sometimes more timeless things. We still are human beings. We still have to face so many of the issues that everybody else has had to face. Mm-hmm. And I just felt that there were other ways perhaps of looking at some of these things. And, well, it was on, as far as the organic side is concerned, it's 30 years ago now, I suppose I felt that what was happening in the conventional agri-industrial field was unsustainable over a long term, because it didn't actually pay attention to nature, didn't pay attention to the health of the soil, and I thought was over-dependent on chemicals, and indeed on very often the prophylactic use of antibiotics in everything, animal feed and you name it. And now, indeed, we've got a huge problem, which is antimicrobial resistance.
You have a book called Harmony, and it's this idea that the iron rule of ecology is that everything is connected. But when you try to reach people and affect change, they seem to be resistant to the things that make the most sense. So how have you managed to navigate that? And governments included, because governments are a really big player in this, right?
Well, I don't know. I've always just felt the secret is not to be party political. But I mean, for instance, when I raised issues around planning and architecture and actually consulting local people and so on, nobody had bothered to talk about these things very much. And the regeneration and reuse of historic buildings and huge complexes, all that I felt was a waste of assets. But it's extraordinary how you come up against the conventional approach. So when I suggested that you could actually create mixed use, mixed income communities, and not just housing estates as ghettos, really, of either rich or poor people, and you could mix affordable housing with private housing, I was told that in the real world this couldn't be done. So anyway, I went away and did it. And now it's suddenly become a bit more the thing.
Coming up, we're going to continue our conversation with the Prince of Wales, and we're going to talk about how he passes on the tradition of public life and service to his kids. Welcome back to the program and our exclusive conversation with the Prince of Wales. Prince Charles is the heir to the throne of 16 countries, including Canada. That's a big job. What do you do with it? Well, look, we all have our own opinions of the monarchy, but if that's your life, you have to make your choices. And for the Prince of Wales, it's about duty. It's about service, ultimately passing those messages along to his sons. But for him, where did he get his inspiration? Did somebody give you great advice you were given about public service when you were growing up?
Oh yes, I have endless people. I mean, I've always rather had an exaggerated respect for and interest in older people, trying to pick up some of their wisdom and experience. So yes, endless people who I used to ask about things and sat and listened to. You pick up a lot that way.
Is there something that resonates with you that you kind of keep close to your heart? I was reading in your harmony books, it's that Gandhi quote that you had quoted, this idea that at first people will laugh at you and then they'll ignore you and then they will fight you and then you win.
Well, yes, possibly. But usually after you're dead, I think.
Yeah. Do you think much? I mean, when you've built, like for decades now, this legacy of the charities and the trust, all these different areas that you're working in, do you counsel your kids, and there's grandkids now, about what service could be and what can be done in this role?
Yes, I mean, with children, it's always, you've got to be careful not to overdo that. But I don't know, I just felt that if they witnessed, or sometimes people absorb things by osmosis, and I mean, they're terrific, both my children. They rush about doing every kind of thing. So I think they've got also this feeling, and I mean, it's called duty, which has become an old-fashioned word for some reason. But that was what I was always brought up to understand. And there is an enormous amount that needs doing. There are masses of people who need help and encouragement, and I mean, I'm just one of those people who minds. And so when I find things that aren't happening somewhere, I want to do something about it. I'm the bane of my office and everybody who works.
You are?
Well, I always come up with another idea.
What's it like when someone receives a phone call from you when you want to bring a new idea?
I don't know. But oh yes, where's he going now?
That's right. I want to talk about quality of life is something we talk about, and all the different areas. How do you actually get it to resonate with people?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I hope some of it does. It's always difficult to tell. I mean, interestingly, I think on the built environment community planning side, because when you involve people and sit down with them and facilitate an opportunity to come together and look at a potential new development, it's amazing how it helps almost as a cathartic process to release tensions, and people, if you do it over 2 or 3 days, and people have an opportunity to say what they're looking for, before you know where you are, you're actually creating, a rather timeless, more, we called it, traditional arrangement, with a recognizable centre and heart. And I've always felt that the secret is how to reintegrate the human being and nature into the whole design process. Because for the last, I don't know, whatever it is, 80, 90 years or 100 years, we've designed everything with the car at the centre and not the pedestrian. And if you change that round and put the pedestrian at the centre and nature, you create a completely different, more humane, people-centred, walkable environment, which could be much more attractive.
Could you ever imagine London being that way, though? Or even in Canada, Toronto?
You see, that was how it was designed. Yeah. And I mean, all the greatest cities were all designed on that basis. And that's why, I mean, ironically, here in London, the two areas that hold their value and rise in value even more than anywhere else are Mayfair and St James's.
Where you can walk?
Because it's the quality of the environment. You could walk, and it has, smaller streets. I mean, the interesting thing, what I've done is to show that you can do this in today's world and still have all the benefits of modern life and technology. It doesn't have to mean you go back to the Middle Ages. But by narrowing the streets and curving and everything else, which we've shown how you can do it, you control the car and people can reclaim the streets, including children. So you don't need, false sleeping policemen and, calming points and narrowings and all this stuff that they have to retrofit. So if you think about it and reintroduce you know, the mixed communities. You don't have everything zoned. So people live over there, then they have to drive miles to work there, and then you put the factories somewhere else.
That's a big rethink for people, isn't it, to get them to go there?
But when they see it on the ground, people actually frequently can't believe it's possible. So the secret is to provide people with an alternative.
The conversation with the Prince of Wales continues. Right after this, we'll talk about his relationship with Canada. All right, welcome back to the program and our exclusive interview with the Prince of Wales. Now, we've talked about the Prince's charities, and for decades, they've helped thousands of people in a myriad of ways. Everything from working with at-risk youths to building restoration in China. And on the Prince of Wales' last tour to Canada, he inspired 2 CEOs with his Seeing is Believing program to start their own. This one is called the Aboriginal Youth Hiring Initiative.
He is incredibly, conversant in all of these initiatives that he's engaged in, and he does really believe it personally.
And somebody who represents a controversial at times, but very significant personages in the history of Canada and its relationship with Aboriginal people.
What he was originally sort of criticized for or not respected for has now become absolutely conventional thinking.
Given the certain circumstances politically in Canada, I think the relationship with the Crown is extremely important for Aboriginal people today.
Let's see the little leaf and the tie. What's your relationship like with Canada over the years? You've got that down.
You're the one who can tell me.
Yeah, no, you don't. I don't. You do.
But I love coming to Canada. I enjoy always seeing Canadians everywhere. But I mean, as you can imagine, I feel a great interest in everything that's going on in Canada. So when we come this time, I find, of course, it gets busier and busier because I now have more and more organisations that I'm involved with and try and take an interest in. Fitting it all in is always quite difficult.
The more you travel around the world, do you see the commonalities between people and how we are the same?
Yes. I mean, I'm a great believer, for what it's worth, in unity through diversity. And the key is to encourage diversity. But you can create it. You create the unity through recognizing people's individual cultures and outlook. And that's the point, I think. But what I try to do is enable people to feel pride in their own cultural identity.
When did you have a moment where you felt like you had really found your voice? When you started to engage in this world and you thought, yeah, this is what I should be doing?
Long time ago. I mean, I used to think about these things an awful lot, I suppose. I observed and then read and felt about these things, talked to people. And what I've been terribly anxious to do is to capture the wisdom and experience that we've inherited over thousands of years before people who had all that in different ways and skills disappeared. Because in the 1960s, so many of these things were being thrown away, literally, as being no longer relevant in any way. So it was almost as if an axe had come down between the past and present. And that seemed to be crazy because our lives consist of a balance and a blend between the past and the present. You can't tell what's going to happen in the future. We have to live in the present. So I wanted to capture some of this wisdom and knowledge before it was all gone. That's what I'm trying to do, and encourage the acquisition of skills. I mean, it's riveting how things come round, because I mean, this country 30, 40 years ago, we abandoned apprenticeships, for instance. Other countries didn't. Germany didn't. And for years I've been trying to say, look, we need to encourage the skills amongst young people in this, that, and the other area, which is indeed what I've tried to do with my Prince's Trust.
I've seen you meet kids who have benefited from the programs, and we've interviewed people on our show who've talked about it in the past. How does that make you feel when you see the growth?
Very proud. Yeah. I mean, I met several last night. We had a reception for My Princess Trust, and this was the enterprise program, which is starting people in their own businesses. So I've been doing that since, well, in the last 34, 35 years. And we've set up nearly 90,000 businesses. But the fun for me is now to meet people we started 30 or 25 years ago who've made literally millions. And very often either they sell their company sometimes, and then they come back and help give generously to my trust to keep it going.
A real pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Merci.
Thank you for your time. All right, well, there you have it. That is it for the program today. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching it with us. Thank you so much to the Prince of Wales as well for being so gracious with his time, especially, as you could tell, as he was feeling under the weather. What an absolute treat it was to spend the time with him and to spend it with you. Have a good night.